Behind every brand, every movement, every leader, every transformation, there's a story. And intertwined in these stories is a message. And this podcast is for you, the next gen leader, coach, entrepreneur, and influencer. My name is Travis Brady, and I'm a branding mentor and sales story strategist. I hope you see me more of a guide than a host as I share the stories behind the brands, so you can take these stories, experiences, principles, and teachings and use them to share your story with the world. And what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Story Behind the Brand. We're going to be talking about the story behind your team culture. I got an awesome guest with you here today. Got introduced to me from a connection of a connection, Coach Chris Carlisle, or how his team and athletes call him Coach C. He's a best-selling author of Move or Die, motivational speaker, and he has a wealth of experience that he's going to share today. And I love these types of conversations because I love sports. I grew up playing sports, baseball, basketball, football. Those were my main three. I struggle watching baseball a little bit to this day until it's the World Series. That World Series went by really fast. Did you watch that at all?
I watched a little bit of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was exciting. You know, it was two big budget teams, and really you saw throughout that whole time what was the culture that really changed the way that the game was played in the end. One team went down and was able to find. You look at Freddie Freeman, who was hurt most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when it came time to put the bat in his hand, he comes out and wins the MVP. And you look at the big hitters for the Yankees, they just didn't show up. And
Yeah. Yeah. Judge didn't do anything until
uh,
the last game. In the last game, the series was pretty much
sure.
almost over. But anyways, let's go back to you for a second, fill in the gaps. So the listeners can know a little bit more about you.
Well, I started coaching back in 1985, where we all wore leather helmets. And when I got out of college, I had such an ego, okay, that I thought I couldn't learn anything more. I knew more about football than Bill Walsh did, who was with the 49ers. And so I didn't even apply for an assistant's job coming right out of college. Why would I sit behind somebody who I had to know more than? All right. And so must have been a good salesman. I got a head coaching job right out of college. And so we were 1-3, and I was driving the school bus home, and that epiphany struck me. I don't know anything about the game of football. And so I went back into the stream of coaching, got another job. I left that job because I wasn't doing them any favors. Went down to Arkansas, started working with the staff there. And I went through a phase I call arrogance, ignorance, and inflexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And the arrogance, of course, was I thought I knew everything. The ignorance was the way I coached, and it was all about volume. My mentors at that time that I watched on TV were Bobby Knight, Bo Schembechler, Woody Hayes, Vince Lombardi, and they had two things in common. Number one, they won championships, which is fabulous,
Mm-hmm.
but they all yelled. And I thought, that's got to be the key. That if I yell more and louder than these guys, I can win more games. And so I became a bully. I became an intimidator. And so I thought that's the way we did it. This is a way. And I didn't change really until you see the mark here. I
Mm-hmm.
had my skull crushed by, if you're in Arkansas, you understand this, but a
Mm-hmm.
chicken house fan. It crushed my skull. This has all been replaced. This is
Wow.
all titanium here. And I just had taken a job at Subiaco Academy, which is a Class C2 school in Arkansas. I went to the University of Arkansas, still wanted to coach, and I went back into the high school level. And then I had the accident in June, and then football started in August. And so the doctor went through his final check, and he said, you can't strain, you can't lift weights because intracranial pressure going to kill you. I said, all right,
Mm-hmm.
check. You can't hold a sneeze in, intracranial pressure. Check. He said, and you can't yell. And I looked for my toolbox and I pulled out a little, the sledgehammer was gone. No longer could I use this sledgehammer that gave me the record. Travis, my record of that time after 11 years in coaching was 33 wins, 77 losses, and one tie. 33, 77, 1. If you hired me, you could assure yourself of at least 3 wins a season, right? And so what a calling card that was.
So
And
as soon as you got a hard head, you couldn't no longer be a hard head, is what I take it.
right, and so I started that first practice with these kids that were coming. It was a boarding school, so I hadn't been around the kids. So here comes the athletes, and the first day I only could speak at this level. Now, I've been coaching for 11 years. I played football all the way through high school and college. And when I talk like this, for the first time in my career, the athletes did something. Instead of rearing back in respect, they leaned forward because they wanted to hear what I had to say.
Mm.
And what a great transition, what a great epiphany. And I don't want to get on the pulpit here, but I've always believed that there's a power in this universe that keeps us on path.
Yep.
And sometimes this power will nudge you this way or nudge you that way to get you back in. I was hard-headed and I didn't listen and I wouldn't listen. And then this power took this rolled up newspaper in the form of a chicken house fan, which is about 4 feet tall and the blades are rather huge.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he hit me across the face. And that epiphany was, you can be a teacher and not a bully.
Yeah, we
So
talk about the four archetypes of a brand leader: the lover, the magician, the warrior, and the king. And the warrior is the action taker, the doer. And I think a lot of coaches resemble that warrior type personality, but there's also a shadow of that warrior, which is actually called the bully. Um, and so that's very interesting that you talk about that. And I think that whatever archetype you're in, you will at some point in time fall into the shadow. So it's funny that you say that. I've been talking a lot about how I believe like God always delivers at the end of the day, and you kind of mentioned that same thing in a different light. So so this experience really changed you. Tell us a little bit about your journey in coaching. Where did you start? Where did you go? I know we were talking on the phone a
right,
couple of weeks ago, and you were talking about the greatest run I've ever seen in my entire life, which was by Marshawn Lynch.
right.
And I just, yeah, that run is by far the greatest. That run is everything that a running back, in my opinion, must have: strength, flexibility, like the will to not go down. And I know you worked with them. So talk to us a little bit about your professional career and some of the things that went from that time on.
Well, as I said, started in high school, moved to another high school, and then had the opportunity to go to the University of Arkansas as a graduate assistant in the weight room. From there, I went to Subiaco because I thought I still had some football in me. From there, I went to Trinity Valley Community College, which is a small college in Athens, Texas. We won a national championship. This was after this. And
Wow.
then from there, went to the University of Tennessee. And then I was diagnosed with cancer. And 2 weeks after I started chemo, Pete Carroll called me. He just had gotten the job at USC and said, "Hey, do you want to join me at USC?" Well, I was going through chemo and radiation. There was two choices I could make right there. I could curl up in a ball and say, "Oh no, I'm going to go ahead and push through." No. All right. He believed in me that I'm going to go ahead and get this done. So I said, sure. Headed out to, I had chemo on Friday, packed on Saturday, and on Sunday, on Monday morning, I was on the floor in the weight room at 5:30 a.m., ready to go for the 6 o'clock group. And so from the University of Tennessee, then after 9 years, we were very successful there. And then we went to Seattle for 9 years. And that takes us to now January 8th, 2011. It's the first round of the playoffs. It was a wild card. Now, we'd won the NFC West with a record of 7 wins and 9 losses. Well, it
I, re-
was,
I remember that. That was a weird, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was a weird
Pundits
year.
called it the NFC worst. All right. And so we were playing host to the wild card team from the NFC South, which were the defending world Super Bowl champions, New Orleans Saints. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Talking about Sean Payton and Drew Brees and that great defense and Jimmy Graham. And so they were coming up to Seattle. Everybody, wow, that you shouldn't have to travel 11-5 to a 7-9 team. Well, that was the rules. And
Yeah.
so we're playing first half now. It is 24-20. It's been a kind of a back and forth game. Both teams go in their locker room. Everybody gets refreshed. Head coach comes out, talks to the team. Team all heads out the door. Okay. I was waiting for the last person to come out because I could go ahead and give Coach Carroll the thumbs up that everybody was out of the locker room because you don't want to run out on kickoff team and not have one of your players out there by you just missed him. And so
Mm-hmm.
last person out was Marshawn Lynch, our running back. And so we're walking down the hall, and I lean into him and I say, "You got this, big man." And he turned to me and he said, "Bitches ain't willing to bleed." And he jogged out the tunnel onto the field. Now I'm a professional watcher. I get to watch people when they're in these kinds of situations. Now I've got to fast forward to the fourth quarter. We're still ahead. It's like 34-30 or something. And we're on our 33-yard line. It's 2nd and 7. Um, and we call a 15 power or a 15 reach. And so Marshawn begins his steps over, gets the ball, plants his foot, and cuts back. And he breaks a tackle, and he breaks a tackle, and he breaks another tackle down the field. The crowd now in Seattle, that crowd is really loud.
Oh yeah.
Paul Allen
Mhm.
made the stadium so the noise would reverberate back down and crash down on the field. So it was loud. And so Marshawn's breaking tackles, breaks to the sideline. He broke 9 tackles before he dives into the end zone backwards. All right. So at that same
I feel
time,
like we have to watch this again.
I don't know if you have it queued up
Yeah.
or not, but it was a tremendous, tremendous run. And the thing that happened because Seattle is on a fault line was there's seismographs all over the city. And the second that Marshawn dives into the end zone, the seismograph picks up an M2 earth tremor. All right. So they call it the beast quake run because he actually shook the earth. And here's the story. Here's the story. There he comes. Here he comes. So we line up 33-yard line, 2nd and 7, breaks to the left, cuts back, tackle broke, tackle broke. Then he pushes off. Tyler Columbus, offensive lineman out in front of him, dives in, touchdown, earthquake. All right. So here's the important thing. Here's the lesson that learned right here. Okay. The lesson that comes out of this is that at any one time, a person who wants to go ahead and make things happen, that is, using his terminology, the bitches ain't willing to bleed, who is willing to bleed, to willing to do whatever it takes, can move the earth. One person did this through sheer force, sheer desire to go ahead and bleed for his team, for his organization, for the fans, and score, cause the earth to move. Think about that. One person
That's pretty
moved
profound.
the earth. And so that's when we talk about a culture of an organization, and you have that kind of guy that's in the organization. He broke 9 tackles. And if you're not familiar with football, there's only 11 defenders on the field.
Yeah.
9 tackles he broke right there.
That's what makes
Right?
that run so epic too. Is he just like he literally took down the whole defense.
Yeah.
So you've had a chance to work with a lot of teams. Let's talk about like what are some of the unsaid things that players do, teams do to really build a culture. And I think, you know, people talk about talent and having the right people. and playing together. But where I feel like it all starts is that culture. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Culture comes from the top down. I watch a lot of players on TV and they talk about culture starts in the locker room. You can't have a culture if you're going to go ahead and sit out if you don't get paid enough. All right. A culture is a thought process that goes from the top down. If you look at the NFL, 7 to 8 teams change coaches every year. And a lot of these changes are because of a lack of culture. And a culture is a way of doing things, the way of living your life, because it's not only in business, it's in life also, that you have the opportunity to continue to live through your life in a way that is organized. First of all, you got to understand who you are. That's the biggest thing people miss is they don't know who they are. I talk to colleges and I ask people, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know yet. Well, what's your passion? What would you do for free?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now here's my story. I never knew how much money I made in my career. I didn't even look at the numbers because they were paying my wife for me to go do what I love to do. I had a passion to help. Now it used to be my passion was to win championships. When I was 8 years old, 9 years old, I told my buddy Nate Lau, we were playing football in the backyard. It was after a Monday night. We were playing slow motion football on Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
in which you reenact the games that you saw Howard Cosell go through at halftime of Monday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned to Nate and I said, Nate, one day I'm going to win a Super Bowl. All right. Now, I went through the whole process, high school, junior, won a national championship at a junior college. It didn't satisfy me. Went to Tennessee, won a national championship. Didn't satisfy me. Went to USC, won a national championship. Didn't satisfy me. Went to the Seahawks, won a Super Bowl. This was my life dream. And I'm sitting there on the plane as we're sitting in LaGuardia, waiting for because it was a blizzard game. And we're waiting for a window to open up so we can fly home after the game.
Mm-hmm.
Was I celebrating? No, I was working on the program that we weren't going to use until April. We'd already put it together throughout the season, my staff and I was just dotting the T's and crossing the I's. I was so meticulous in what I was doing. It was so important to do it right
Mm-hmm.
that I went over and went over. Instead of celebrating what my life dream was, I was sitting there working on a program I didn't need to have until April. And it was February. I'm sorry, February. And I sat back and I looked around. Everybody else was celebrating. They're either still in the throes of celebration or they were passed out from the celebration. And I thought, maybe this thing that I'm chasing, this is where I come to that understanding of myself, was not to win championships. Must be something else. So I started for the next couple of years thinking about it. And what it is, and this is what I do today, is that I get people to help them move to who they were meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did it all through when I was a teacher. I was helping students become college students so they could go ahead. And I've got doctors, lawyers, and judges that were all former students of mine. Then I got in the NFL or in college, and I helped these young athletes in their lives. And some became millionaires in the NFL, and some became professionals. But because of the way that they're brought up and the culture we talked about, and I began to understand myself that that's what I was supposed to do. So when my opportunity came to leave coaching, I got right. I wrote a best-selling book and to carry on the story and to continue about culture. You've got to understand yourself. Second of all, you got to surround yourself with the best people possible. Al Capone said when he talked about who can you trust, he was asked this question. He said, "I would rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies." Al Capone said, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. I'd rather have 4 people that I had great value in, that I could understand what they wanted and who I wanted, and they were there for me, than 100. Think about that. It's still a dollar, but if you're going to carry 100 pennies in your pocket or 4 quarters, which one are you going to carry? So if you have all these acquaintances and all these friends, are they there for you?
Mm-hmm.
Because in life, there's 2 types of anchors. There's the anchors that keep you from becoming who you're meant to be. and they're the anchors that are there to keep you from crashing into the rocks.
I think a lot of people don't realize that the environment that they're in keeps them from growing into the person they're supposed to be.
Sure.
And I feel like they have this loyalty to them that isn't always the same on the way back. And they tank their dreams, they tank their lives because of it. And as strong as someone is, your environment is just stronger than you are. Change isn't hard for people, it's hard for the people around you. And so when you're around people that don't support you're changing and becoming the best version of yourself, you just stay stuck. And I think this is the story of a lot of people in their lives. Going back to what you were talking a little bit about earlier about these and he said it just like that, these bitches aren't willing to bleed. I feel like the leader is really what sets the culture, but they don't do it in the way that I've noticed that most culture, like most people think. There's this really cool video. I don't know if you've seen, it's this at this concert, and it's this guy, this little kid going and dancing, and he's dancing really crazy. And then these other guys come up and he embraces them and gets them dancing. And before you know it, there's this whole hillside of people dancing. I feel like the goal of the leader is to embrace that next person, that next follower as a leader. And it's, you've heard of, I don't know if you've heard of the tipping point of a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's really what it takes to get the tipping point. I don't know if you've seen similar examples like that in your coaching over the years.
Sure. I think every successful coach I had was in that point. I work with Scotty Connolly at Trinity Valley, who taught me that it wasn't being a bully, but his tipping point was treat everybody with respect. And then when you come to Pete Carroll, and his thing was he had a philosophy, and everybody understood that philosophy, and it's always compete. Now with football, it's all about the ball, but you've got to keep making sure everybody understands what the philosophy is and what it means, because he also had a style. Everybody had great effort, great enthusiasm, great toughness, and they played smart. And he talked about it every single year. And he'd bring it up and he'd bring it up and bring it up. And when you have a culture, you've got to be able to go from the top to the bottom. And so Pete would talk to the whole organization. Everybody within the organization understood this is who we are and this is what we do. And we understand how it works. And then everybody's got to understand what their part in this culture is about. You've got to understand what your job takes to do. And then you've got to go ahead and do your job. Mm. And you've got to do that job, not because you get paid, but because you understand that your job, without you, this whole organization falls apart.
Yeah.
And that comes from the top.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I've
that's
noticed
from the person on top has got to send that. You can't just be doing a job. You've got, this is so important. If you don't do this, we're not going to be able to get where we want to go. And then you come in, now you have ownership. Now you believe in the org. You're just not believing in the check. You're believing that I'm going to go ahead and make a difference. I'm going to go ahead and move the world because I'm willing to bleed for this organization. That's what happens. And that's where the great ones are. I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
It's an extreme mindset. It's an extreme culture. And
is it is it only extreme because as a culture in this country, we want to have minimal Mondays? That it's okay. It's okay to go ahead and take that mental off day. Hey, if you want to be great, if you want to be the best, then you've got to go hard every day. Mm-hmm. And it's a mentality, a culture that I don't think we have a lot anymore.
It's definitely the grittiness of our country, I think, is definitely going down. And I think a lot of it comes back down to fathers not being the main leader in the families. There's like you look at most kids, you know, they grow up with their teachers being women. You know, the kids usually get to go with their moms when there's a divorce, right? There's a lack of like real brotherhood and masculinity that I think that is lacking in our country. And I think the byproduct of it is people start to get soft, and you think about the environment, just like the environment's just different now versus back then. Right. And my dad was very tough gritted. My grandpa, very tough gritted, grew up working at a body shop, playing football. Um, so I feel like I still have some of that tough mentality, but I agree. What else do you think it is in the world that's caused like this softness in our society?
Uh, I'm going to disagree with you. I think a single parent house with a mother who's a strong personality mother, all right, that pushes their children to be better than you are and not give them excuses. My dad was the main figure of our house, but he was gone a lot working, and my mom became the hammer. And so, I grew up with women teachers, and they instructed us on how to be better. I became a teacher because of Mrs. McCauley. So
Mm,
what happens now in today's society is there's options. Well, if you don't feel like it, don't do it. No. When was that an option? This is the opportunity. This is the job. This is what we get to do. And it becomes a get to versus got to opportunity. You get to go ahead and grind. And I was talking to my son who's a coach at ASU, and he goes, "Yeah, we're in the grind." I said, "You know what that means? That grind? That's a cool part because you take these big problems, you grind them down to gravel and use it foundation that you build off of for that next game."
mm,
And too many people, oh, it's a grind. Thank God it's a grind because you're being tested on how far you want to go. And what happens is we start willowing out people in society that don't want to be great. Now they'll complain when they don't get all that they want. They'll complain when they're not in the C suites after 2 years in the mailroom. But that's what you've got to earn. And that's what's missing in the society today, that people want to be given. They don't want to have to go out and earn it. And that, I think that's where the problem is, in that we're not getting farther along. And it could, it may be masculine, it may be feminine, but I think it doesn't matter in that case. I think what matters is, what are you being aimed at? Are you
Yeah, and I do agree with what you're saying. I still go back to a huge part of it, I think, is lack of male leadership. And I think the misconception though is like, oh, I didn't grow up with a dad. A lot of people didn't grow up with a dad. I had a really incredible dad. But what I will say is, how many father figures did that person have? Was it a
Oh,
good
yeah.
father figure? Was it someone that had learned work ethic and accountability? And I have a 4-year-old, and one of the most important things for my 4-year-old, at least this age and time, is to teach him to be honest and to
Mm-hmm.
tell the truth.
There you go.
And yet last night, some of the houses have the candy buckets, out there, and it says take one. And all the kids are just grabbing that. And I go, Tatum, I call him Bubba's. That's his nickname. I go,
Yeah.
Bubba's, what did it say? It said take one.
There
How
you go.
many did you take? Did you take more than one? Okay. And he said yes. And one of the other parents go, wow, I can't believe he told you the truth.
Mm.
I wasn't surprised because I give my son the space without getting upset for telling the truth. Because
Right.
telling the truth is more important to me than the mistake that he made.
Yeah.
And
I
so
agree.
I said, Bubba's, go back and put some candy back. And I was so proud of him. Like, I
Yeah.
celebrated him so much. I didn't care so much about the mistake. I cared the fact that he made the mistake right.
Right.
And I think, going back to what you're saying, yeah, just the environments that kids are in, and it feels like you can't push kids the same way that you used to be able to push the kids, especially as a coach. Did you notice any of that transition as a coach, being in football so long? Like, it's almost like you couldn't push them the same way you used to,
Well,
or
I think that's a new thing. I really think, and I always get fired up when I see the commercial from AWS predicting injuries before they happen. And it's a whole idea of the analytics and the sports science, that we're going to do less because less is more. Recovery is more. How did we win before, when we were working hard and everybody was getting better all along the way? John Harbaugh talked about it a couple of years ago with the new sports science, in that the athletes of today are not being calloused. Calloused, when you work, you build up calluses, you build up that resilience, that the ability to persevere when times get hard. But if you're not pushed there, then eventually you're going to get in that situation where you're going to have to accelerate a little faster. You're going to have to cut a little harder. And what happens? Bing, there goes a hamstring, there goes a groin, there goes an ACL. And you never saw these kind of injuries, these numbers of injuries that are happening when you were training and preparing at the highest level. But when people start putting numbers down and taking numbers from, and this is where sports science gets all their numbers from, is English soccer, Australian rules football, rugby, where they put all their information into a big vat. And so you have all this information you can pull down. They don't have it on college and the NFL because these guys are all holding their information to their pocket. They're not showing their cards to anybody because if I help you, you're going to beat me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens now is that we're doing less. There's more walkthroughs. And if we look at the number of quarterback injuries in the last 5 years, ever since they went from OTAs where there's no contact now and you can't line up against each other, offensive lineman skills have begun to deteriorate because they're not working. Being an offensive lineman, and I'm an all offensive lineman, is you've got to get used to hands-on, feeling the tug, feeling the pull, feeling the defensive lineman working their shoulders, dipping and ripping. And they don't feel it anymore because you don't have enough reps. Anders Ericsson talked about the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if a lot of people throwing rocks at it, but it starts putting a number that you've got to go full speed so many times in order to become the elite.
Yeah.
But if
Well,
we
going
take
back
it
to what,
away,
yeah, going back to what you said a little bit earlier, how you
yes,
were
sir.
kind of arrogant about what you thought you knew.
Yeah.
Going back to my son was getting frustrated. He wasn't catching the ball. And I don't think he got this, but it's going to be a reoccurring theme that I share with him. I like, Tatum, you're going to need way more reps than what you think you do to get to the level that you want to be at. And it's okay making mistakes. It's okay dropping the ball. I think people are a little bit delusional with how much reps they actually need. And I think as a younger athlete, my mentality was I'm just not as gifted as some of these kids. But I think what is unsaid is how many experiences and how many reps they're getting in from an unconscious standpoint. And then we say, oh, that kid's talented. Well, you weren't around them when they were playing a ball in the backyard, hitting a basketball with a golf club off the tee. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I don't know if you've ever saw the documentary, the Pursuit of Greatness. Have you seen that?
I might have. I watch a
It's
lot of documentaries.
it's Wayne Gretzky, Jerry Rice. They talk about
Okay.
what's the recipe for this
Right.
amazing athletes. And one of the reoccurring themes is that they learn these athletic abilities in all these different types of sports. And then those, they bring the agility and the coordination of those sports into the main sport. And this is when I was working up at the University of Utah as a strength and conditioning coach. Coach Winningham, he was a big supporter in his athletes being athletic. So we'd go play handball. They'd get in the pool and do kayaking. Like they did all these really cool, crazy things because there was a lot of carryover from one to the other. And I think that's unsaid I think that's a lot of unsaid things. And you could absolutely apply that same thing in the business world as well.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. How
Yeah.
many hours did you spend on computers? How many hours did you work on creativity, on
Mm-hmm.
drawing, on design? And that all leads to I'm a great marketing person. I'm a great salesman. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
great people person. You can't be a great people person if you're not around people. Here's a great example.
True.
So I'm in Bellevue, Washington, and I go. My son just started playing contact football,
Mm-hmm.
and so he had started camp when we were in camp, and so it was a preseason game. We played on a Thursday night. So Friday, I went to watch him practice, and I'm standing there in Seattle. It's rainy, misty, and there's another gentleman standing next to me, and we introduced each other. And he said, "So what do you do?" I said, "I'm the strength coach with the Seattle Seahawks." And he goes, "Well, how do you get that job?" I said, "Well, I was with Pete Carroll in USC. He brought the culture up and I came with it."
Nice.
And he asked me, so I said, Steve, I said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm the CEO for Microsoft. It was Steve Ballmer.
Mm,
And I said, because he asked me, I asked him. I said, how do you get that job? He goes, well, it really helps when your college roommate is Bill Gates. Now, here's the story. Here's the underline. Bill Gates and Paul Allen were computer guys. They weren't outgoing. They weren't, Bill Gates, of course, has grown into that point now, but they weren't at that time. They were guys who coded. All right. So they needed to have a mouthpiece for Microsoft. Now,
hmm
if you've ever seen Steve Ballmer, I mean, he is bombastic. He is all over the place. But
hmm
he was that guy who wasn't afraid to say whatever it was to anybody to get the job done. He
hmm
was a salesman. He was a marketing guy, and he really was good. And so he was the mouthpiece because Paul Allen, and Steve and Bill Gates understood who they were, but more importantly, they understood who they weren't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the key to a great culture.
Kind of like Steve Wozniak and
Yeah,
Steve Jobs as well. Yeah, they were
yeah.
kind of contrasting away. Let's go back to you. So, what made you decide to get in speaking and coaching after this long career? Tell us a little bit about the stuff you've learned. A lot of the people listening right now, they're speakers, they're coaches. So, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to go this route and what you've learned along the way.
Like we talked about, I sat on the airplane, I looked around, and I just won a Super Bowl, my whole dream of my life, supposedly, since I was 8 or 9, and it
Mm-hmm.
didn't move my needle. But what I sat back and watched was how many emails and texts I get from former players and former students, that how much of an effect I had on their life. And I started thinking about that my whole world was about helping people to become who they are meant to become. And you talked about the mentors and stuff, and the people in your that you have to look up to. Some of these people came out of broken families, broken homes, and I was that guy who believed in them, who would do anything I could to help them, because I got nothing out of it, Travis. I got my salary. I didn't get a bonus for helping Reggie Bush put on 20 pounds and lose 2/10 of a second in his 40. All right. I didn't get any money for that, but my job was to help him become as good as he wanted to. Now, how can I do it in real life? There are so many people that need to hear our message, the locker room voice that
Mm-hmm.
says, I believe in you, but you have got to go ahead and work. You've got to want it more than I do. I tell all my clients when I talk to them, don't let me believe in you more than you believe in yourself.
Yeah, that's a problem anytime that
That
is.
is the key to it, because we haven't the lucky ones who are brought up in the athletics have that kind of that grit, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's these people, it's the other 95% of society that needs somebody to be that coach that's in their ear, that makes them, or pushes them a little farther, pushes that envelope just a little bit more, so they can say, man, I can do this. Because once they start breaking these barriers that they put up mentally, and that self-talk that people have kills them. Like you talked about the environment that they're around, but then it comes to you. 85% of the messages that you tell yourself, this is a study, 85% are negative. And that's 80,000 messages you send yourself a day. Think about how negative you are towards yourself. If you
Yeah.
start changing your narrative and start believing in yourself, then all of a sudden things are going to happen. This, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I could do that. I've had people that are in my group that are now moving towards a C-suite, because all of a sudden they thought, well, no, I've run into a glass ceiling. No, you built that ceiling. Find the door and get out of it. And now they're excelling in their business and their professional career because of one thing: they believe in themselves. And it took somebody who believed in them to help them and find ways that they could do it even better. And so that, Travis, that's the key to success, is believing in yourself, understanding yourself, surround yourself with great people, and positive messaging.
Love it. Yep. Amen to that. Know your brand, build your brand, surround
Mhm.
yourself with, are going to support that brand and build the culture. How do people follow you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Go to my website, www.thecoachcarlisle.com, and all my information there. My blogs are there. I just wrote a blog about being strong enough to move away from people, outgrowing people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got one coming this week about coming to life with an empty cup, and it goes back to the Chinese parable about the professor who knew, came to a guru of Zen and wanted to learn, but spent so much time telling the guru what he knew about it, and the guru starts pouring tea into his cup and starts overflowing. He goes, "Stop, stop! It's full." And the guru looks at him and goes, "Yes." He goes, "When you empty your cup, when you empty your mind, come back and we'll talk about it."
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's coming this next week. And so, my blogs are there. My video, this will be on there eventually, this podcast. All my podcasts, my talks that I do are all on my website. So go there and find it. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, thecoachcarlisle.com or Coach Carlisle, and just look for me there and follow me. And I always open the messages on my website. You can go ahead and message me personally, and I do get back. I don't have a huge staff that does all that for me. I answer all those by myself.
Love it. Well, thanks for jumping on here, Coach. Love the stories. Move or die. Love it. Great, great brand. Thanks for joining us, guys. If you feel like someone can benefit from it, please share the podcast. Okay. Thanks for joining. Be inspired in what you're doing. Remember, you are the brand X Factor, and get your story out to the world.
Hey, you know you have a story to share with the world, which means you need to get on more life stages. We have a jam-packed schedule in 2024 full of events, including our biggest event year to date, Brand X. Go to benextgen.com/speak. Again, benextgen.com/speak. Or you could just click the link in the description. Fill out an application. Our team will reach out to you and show you how our speaker partnership works. Get on a stage, get video, blow up your brand, blow up your business. Let's go.